the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs will come to order. We have, I understand, 2 Ohio witnesses, one who lives in Cleveland and one who was born in Ohio. So, sorry, South Carolina. We've got one out of 3. It's not bad. Okay.
She's equal to the task at hand.
Sure she is.
2 versus 1.
As we begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Senator Helmy, who is not yet here, from New Jersey to the Banking and Housing Committee. We're excited for him to join us. Look forward to working with him on this committee for the next couple months. In the Old Testament, Jacob tricked Isaac and took Esau's birthright. The American public first heard of Charles Ponzi in the 1920s, so scams and frauds are nothing new in this country or in this world. In the last few years, what used to be a trickle of scams, a suspicious email now and then, has started to feel like a flood. These scams can start with a simple text from what seems like a wrong number, or they can be more devious, a call disguised to look like it's from a friend or a local bank. The most manipulative ones use artificial intelligence to disguise their voice or to mimic a family member. All of these you're familiar with. Once they've made contact, the scammers go to work. They might claim to have something in common with you. They might say they're a law enforcement agent who needs help cracking a case. They might claim to be interested in a romantic relationship or a friendship, or even say a child or grandchild is in trouble and needs your help. The scammers will use information found online or the dark web to customize their scams to their targets, an American who has worked hard and saved for retirement and their family's future. That's who usually is the target. The messages may be quick and urgent. They may be intermittent, with the conversation stretching on for months as the scammer builds a relationship. But they always end the same way, a con that drains as much of someone's savings as possible. And we know today savings, since there are fewer defined pensions and more 401ks, the targets are even more rich for these scammers. The data backs up what Americans have experienced. Scams and frauds have never been more pervasive. Criminals will use any means they can to steal Americans' hard-earned money. Wire fraud, peer-to-peer platforms, check fraud. In Ohio alone in 2023, more than $126 million in a state of 12 million people were reported lost to fraud. The stories are heartbreaking. A senior in Warren, Ohio, and near Youngstown, lost $127,000 to criminals posing as bank employees. A man in Mayfield Heights, a suburb of in Cuyahoga County in Cleveland, lost $80,000 to a fake investment scheme. One group running romance scams laundered nearly $12 million in Central Ohio. It happens across our country. The FTC says $10 billion were reported lost to fraud nationwide in 2023, an increase over $1 billion from the previous year. And we know much of this is not reported. Consumers around the country lost at least $270 million through wire fraud. Those are just the scams that are reported. We know many people are reluctant to come forward and report their losses, embarrassed to admit that they were conned. They shouldn't be. These scammers are professionals. They use all kind of new technology, harder and harder to detect, even if you try to be vigilant. These criminals want those they target to feel ashamed and to feel scared to come forward so they can continue scamming others. What these scams can and do affects Americans of all ages, but we know seniors face the greatest threat. It's not just that they may be less familiar with new technology. They're the biggest target because of their retirement savings. I've spent my career fighting for working Ohioans' pensions, but fewer employees offer pensions. More and more seniors have been forced to rely on personal retirement savings accounts built over a lifetime of hard work. These accounts are particularly enticing targets for scammers. Americans over 60 represented more than half the dollars lost to fraud in 2023. Seniors are especially reluctant to come forward. They blame themselves. They don't want to be seen as unable to manage their own finances. But no American, young or old, should ever have to blame themselves when they're defrauded by organized crime. Scammers use new technologies to stay a step ahead of law enforcement. They plan complex, sophisticated frauds that stretch out over months. They'll use fake websites that are impossible to distinguish from real ones. Worst of all, they exploit our best instincts to trust one another, to keep families safe, to act quickly in an emergency. No wonder their schemes so often succeed. We know that scams are now perpetrated by organized networks overseas, some managed, unbelievably, maybe not, by Chinese criminal gangs using slave labor. These criminals have kidnapped thousands of people, locked them in compounds in Southeast Asia, forced them under threat of torture to execute these scams against Americans. It's organized crime, it's human trafficking, it's modern-day slavery, come together with one sinister goal: to steal the nest eggs Americans have worked their whole lives to build. Individual Americans can't fight this threat alone. They shouldn't have to. Federal, state, local law enforcement must work together. They must have the tools and resources they need. But the private sector must step up and do more to protect people. These scams begin often on social media. Tech companies work to prevent these scams from taking root in their platforms. And when payment platforms fail to protect their customers from scams, it's on them to reimburse the scam consumers. Payment platforms like Zelle and Venmo and Cash App need to take responsibility for keeping their customers' money safe and secure and reimburse more consumers who have been scammed on their platforms. Big banks, with all their vast resources and tools at their disposal, also need to do more to identify scams and stop consumers from losing their life savings through wire fraud. And with the rise in wire fraud, the CFPB needs to use its authorities to ensure big banks follow the law and protect consumers from wire fraud. Wall Street firms, tech companies see the same scams over and over and over. We know when something threatens their profits, these big banks spare no expense to try to take it down. They ought to dedicate the same effort, I'd argue a lot more effort, into protecting the money that consumers entrust to them. Senators Hagerty and Tester have introduced a bill to strengthen protections against financial exploitation for seniors by extending protections that exist for brokerage accounts to mutual funds. I appreciate Senator Tester's work on this, and Senator Hagerty's not here yet. Communities across the country, state and local officials have been on the front lines in the fight against scams. Groups like AARP, thank you, have also mobilized to protect seniors and consumers. One leader in these efforts is Ohioan Cheryl Harris, director of the Cuyahoga County Department of Consumer Affairs. We're fortunate to be able to hear from her about her work to protect people in my state, to hear from all our witnesses about the evolving threat from scams and frauds. I look forward to continue our work. Ranking Member Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today, all the witnesses. First and foremost, I want to start today by thanking our law enforcement partners at the state and the federal level. Every day, our law enforcement members work tirelessly to combat crime, including financial crime, and to protect and defend victims in every community around the country. And that's exactly what the frauds and scams are. They are crimes. And the criminals who commit these crimes should be punished accordingly. I also want to acknowledge our regulators, both at the state and the federal level, as well as our financial institutions and companies that work tirelessly to combat and prevent criminal actors from taking advantage of hardworking Americans. This includes their critical work in educating consumers on the warning signs of popular frauds and scams. The first step to stopping fraud is ensuring people are equipped with the tools to recognize the very fraud that so many of us fall victim to. Criminals are inherently looking to benefit themselves without regard for the well-being of others, and certainly without respect of the law. And unfortunately, criminals often prey on our most vulnerable, which of course would be our seniors. Unfortunately, it seems almost daily that I hear a horrible story of hardworking Americans who worked their entire lives forced to come out of retirement after having their scams and their savings wiped out by the scams. My time as ranking member of the Aging Committee allowed me to learn a great deal more about these types of crimes, in particular, the severe detriment they have on our nation's seniors. That is why I advocated to holding hearings directly focusing on these types of fraud and issued an annual fraud book to bring about more awareness of these scams. Today, I look forward to hearing from the panel of witnesses in front of us today so that we can understand the new and emerging solutions to fight this epidemic. And it is my hope that this will not simply turn into a blame game of who's responsible, whether it's the financial industries, whether it's the scammers. We need all hands on deck to solve the problem that we face today and help protect more Americans from the challenges that they have once their savings are gone. I believe, frankly, that part of the solution starts with education. And for my time in Congress, I've continued to promote financial education and financial literacy because those, as my top priorities, allows us to address the very challenges that so many Americans face. If we can help more Americans access financial education, we can help them have the tools to both protect themselves as well as achieve financial freedom. This is why I'm so pleased to have Carrie Grube Leibarker with us today. She's the administrator of the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs before us today, and she will share her perspective and some of the things you've been doing to help combat these challenges. I love this, ditch the pitch. Sometimes the fewer words you use, the more you actually say, the more effective you are communicating. And I will say in a world that is, unfortunately, moving at a faster pace, the longer we have to listen, sometimes the less we actually absorb. And so ditch the pitch gives us at home in South Carolina an opportunity to learn ways to reduce the impact of scams and frankly to detect them quickly and perhaps avoid them altogether. Our nation's seniors are not only the ones affected by these crimes, and these criminals are looking for new targets every single day. Criminals are unfortunately smart and agile. Just like we are working to use new technologies to drive efficiencies and choice, criminals are using new technologies to pad their own pockets at someone else's expense. That's why we must adapt and continually work to innovate. We must also work to educate and combat criminals using these same technologies for ill gain. And let's not forget what we heard in February when this committee examined check fraud. Old technologies are also being used to exploit in an increasing frequent manner. I'll close like I started. I am grateful for the work of our law enforcement, our regulators, and our financial institutions, what they're doing together to combat and prevent financial crime. And I'm really proud of the good work being done to better educate people of all ages on the fraud and scams they face. Today, I hope we hear ideas on how we can improve our technology, our education, and our approaches to stopping these crimes, all the while making sure we are not incentivizing new or additional criminal acts. Thank y'all.
Thanks, Senator Scott. I'll introduce today's witnesses. Amy Knopfziger is the Director of Fraud Victim Support for the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Welcome. Carrie Grube Leibarker is the Administrator and Consumer Advocate of the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs. Welcome, Ms. Leibarker. Cheryl Harris is Director of the Cuyahoga County Department of Consumer Affairs. Thank you all for being here. Welcome. And Ms. Knopfziger, please proceed.
First thing I forgot. Good morning. My name is Amy Knopfziger, and I am the Director of Fraud Victim Support for AARP's Fraud Watch Network. Thank you for inviting me to testify today on behalf of AARP, and thank you for holding this vitally important hearing. Fraud is devastating millions of lives across the country. Each year, AARP's Fraud Watch Helpline receives over 100,000 calls from those impacted by fraud. Many of these calls are absolutely heartbreaking. When I joined AARP doing fraud prevention work in 2001, I believed I would soon put myself out of business by convincing everybody that foreign lottery wins and tax payments and prepaid gift cards were scams. Yet, here I am 23 years later, fighting the same fight, having many of the same conversations. While the conversations with the victims may be the same, AARP's education and outreach efforts have evolved as scammers' tactics have also evolved. I have sat with victims for hours on the phone while they cried and told me how a criminal stole their life savings. Recently, I talked with a Georgia man who reported that he received an email from someone claiming that he had won money and a new car. He lost $70,000 in gift cards to pay the fraudulent fees and was also very worried that his identity had been compromised. Or Cece, a woman who had been married for 30 years who called because she had no one to talk to about her husband, who was a victim of a sextortion cryptocurrency scam and lost over $1 million. She kept saying while on the phone with me, "But Amy, he's so smart. What are we gonna do? I can't tell anyone." Criminals don't care who you are, where you live, or how much money you have. They are simply looking to steal as much as they can, however they can. The FBI estimates that $3.4 billion was stolen from individuals over the age of 60 in 2023. But we believe this figure is vastly underestimated. The true loss to our communities is likely closer to $137 billion a year, according to the FTC. That is money that would have been used for retirement, healthcare, daily expenses, trips, entertainment, dining out, and even spoiling the grandkids. These criminals not only steal from victims they prey on, but the victims' families and the community that they live in. They rob them not only of their money, but their future, their well-being, and too often their dignity. And the lost money is just the beginning. I want to tell you about a healthy older woman who had her life savings stolen by the person she thought was the love of her life. But in fact, he was a master manipulator who spends all day, every day, using every trick in the book to steal money from people. Her daughters told me that her health declined so quickly after she learned he had taken all of her money. The daughters told me that this twice-a-week tennis player's hair started falling out in clumps, and her health deteriorated so fast she died within 4 months when she realized she had been a victim. It is a tragic fact that these criminals wreak havoc and can drive individuals to premature death or even suicide, a reality that is likely underreported and that frankly keeps me up at night. Because of this, we must adapt our approach to combating fraud, just like the criminals are adapting their approaches. Fraud is constant and never rests. It operates 24/7 in our homes and through these devices that we carry in our pockets. Victims' losses have escalated from hundreds and thousands to millions of dollars. Many still believe it won't affect them, but we know this is far from the truth. It impacts individuals across all education backgrounds, income levels, all ages, and across the country. It will happen to you or someone you care for. It may already have, and you just don't know it. AARP has long been committed to educating consumers and supporting fraud victims. Together with thousands of AARP fraud volunteers across all of our state offices, those who volunteer on our Fraud Watch Network helpline, and the dedicated staff of the Fraud Watch Network, we will continue this fight. We look forward to collaborating with you to raise awareness about fraud and to develop effective solutions that protect and support victims and their families. Thank you for your attention to this critical issue, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Nussiger. Ms. Leibarker, welcome.
Thank you very much, Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Scott, and other members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to provide comments to y'all today on this important topic of protecting seniors and others from scams. I am Carrie Gruby Leibarker, and I get to serve as the Administrator and Consumer Advocate for the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs. With me today as well is Kelly Ransford, our agency's Deputy Administrator and General Counsel. The department is South Carolina's consumer protection agency. Overall, our mission is to protect consumers from inequities in the marketplace while giving due regard to those businesses that act honestly and fairly. One of the many roles we have at the department is to receive scam reports. The top 3 scam categories often encompass the purchase of a fake good or service or a lottery or sweepstakes scam, and the largest group of folks filing a scam report is in the 65 to 74-year-old range. The reports we receive help keep us informed of new schemes and tactics used by scammers. A fraudster's goal is the same. They're all trying to separate a consumer from their hard-earned money or their personal information. But there are often new types of schemes that pop up, the romance scam being one of them, and a new twist, like requesting payment via a mobile app. As technology evolves, so do scammers' methods. New technology has helped their schemes seem more legitimate. A common tactic used is spoofing. We initially saw this with telephone numbers, making it look like somebody else was calling or sending a text message, and now spoofing applies to all forms of contact: fake website, a fake email address, hijacked or fake social media, and computer pop-up messages. Security breaches and scams often go hand in hand as well. In this digital age, our personal information is unfortunately more accessible to bad actors, and information stolen in a breach can help make a scheme seem more legitimate. In 2023, the department received reports of 130 breaches affecting over 3.2 million South Carolina residents. And for context, we currently have approximately 5.3 million residents. The department actively tracks the types of scam reports received and uses the information for our outreach efforts. Education is a core component of our mission, and we recognize that it truly is the best defense for avoiding becoming a victim. Our outreach and educational efforts span traditional and non-traditional media distribution. We've adapted to technology and became the first state agency active on the Nextdoor app. Since our first post in October of 2021, we have had over 13 million views, and we credit this exposure to increasing our weekly website visits, our YouTube views, and our webinar attendance. But presentations really are the foundation of our educational initiatives, and over the past 5 years, the department has given over 750 presentations to over 31,000 attendees. Our most popular presentation topic, identity theft and scams, which correlates to our newest offering, Ditch the Pitch Bingo. Each number called during the game has an educational tip on spotting or avoiding scams, and this idea came from a meeting with the U.S. Attorney's Office when they introduced us to the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities Investment Fraud Bingo. We decided that our #1 publication, Ditch the Pitch, would be a great template for the bingo game, and it has taken off. The department first released Ditch the Pitch in 2015. The guide addresses common scams, how to avoid them, and what to do if a consumer reveals their personal information to a scammer. Since 2019, we've given out over 50,000 guides and have had other states and countries reach out and ask for permission to use the content for their own education. This extensive outreach would not be possible without the help of partner agencies and organizations. We can create great, helpful content all day long, but efforts are futile if we don't get them into the hands of those who need it most. Our recent release of our updated Ditch the Pitch is a great example of leveraging partnerships. The South Carolina Department on Aging teamed up with us to distribute the publication to over 9,000 residents who are served by their home-delivered meal program. In addition to state agencies, we partner with local and federal agencies as well as private organizations. Another example of a fruitful partnership is with AARP and their teletown halls. We're able to educate thousands of their South Carolina members in one sitting via an interactive conference call. While education is key to keeping consumers protected, we have seen some other efforts and laws that help as well. One example at the federal level is the FCC's Stir-Shaken framework. From 2019 through 2023, 57% of consumers reporting a scam to the department were contacted by phone. So providing telephone providers the ability to stop scam calls before they get to a consumer, or otherwise alerting that a call is likely a scam, are helpful tools. Newly implemented legislation in South Carolina has also allowed financial institutions and security providers to pause a transaction request if financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult is suspected. We've also seen industries voluntarily initiate notices to consumers when using certain payment methods that are requested by scammers, including warnings at payment terminals when gift cards are being purchased. In closing, I want to thank you for your continuing work to protect consumers and for holding this hearing. We at the department are grateful that you allowed us to be a part of it, and I hope that our comments are beneficial.
Thank you, Ms. Leibar. Ms. Harris, welcome.
Thank you. So my name is Cheryl Harris. I'm the director of the Cuyahoga County, Ohio Department of Consumer Affairs. Thank you so much for the invitation to speak to this committee. Consumer Affairs organizes and convenes Scam Squad, a financial fraud task force. Scam Squad's members include nonprofit and social service agencies that primarily serve seniors, county agencies, and enforcement agencies ranging from local police to the Cleveland offices of the FBI, the U.S. Department of Justice, and the Federal Trade Commission. Our members have 3 shared goals: encourage county residents to report scams, share scam reports with the agency best suited to investigate, and alert residents to current scam threats. We want to create easy ways for people to effectively report scams to enforcement agencies. We encourage members to share scam reports in databases that multiple agencies can access, primarily the FTC's Sentinel database. We create innovative scam alerts and reminders that can be replicated at scale. My office receives only a small sliver of the scam reports filed by county residents, roughly 800 to 1,000 a year. About 10% of those involve a dollar loss. The majority of our scam reports come from our older residents. We interview people who report scams to us, regardless of whether they lost money, to help consumers limit the fallout from scams and to spot changes in both scam techniques and scam payment methods. What I can tell you from these interviews is that scammers have designed psychologically complex scams to make people believe the scammer is a trusted authority. The scammer tells the person they're facing a dire problem. For example, they're about to be arrested or the government is about to seize their bank account. The scammer is able to isolate the victim by giving a plausible sounding reason that they can't tell anyone else. The victims then become reliant on the scammer, so whose solution then is to route money to the scammer. Scammers use all sorts of technology in these scams, which we've discussed a little. They pose as trusted authorities by spoofing caller ID. They know information about people when they call because of all the consumer data that companies collect and sell or fail to protect. And many scammers convince panicked people to allow them remote access to their computers so they can further manipulate victims. Today, we're seeing individuals lose much larger amounts to scams in shorter periods than ever before. Scam losses reported just to my office have doubled in the last year, from 1.2 million in 2023 to 2.7 million so far this year. That doesn't include scam losses reported to any of our partner agencies. In one scam, scammers posing as federal agents panic people into believing they are under investigation because drug traffickers are using their bank accounts. These scams are designed to terrify people into believing that they're going to lose all their money, so that when the nice fake federal agent tells them they can protect their life savings by moving it into a government wallet, and that's scam speak for crypto, people do it. We know of at least 2 cases in which scammers posing as federal agents not only took the victim's life savings, but then told them they were in mortal danger and needed to move. When the victims sold their houses, the scammers got the proceeds from the sales too. Many of those payments were made in crypto. Crypto payments are fast, they're final. There's no protection for consumers. Just last week, the FTC said Sentinel data shows that from 2020 to 2023, scam losses involving crypto increased tenfold to over 110 million nationwide, and that's just crypto. Consumers over 60 are 3 times more likely than other adults to lose money in crypto. I'm thrilled the Banking Committee is delving into meaningful ways to stop scams. Through your work, you have the ability to help older Americans avoid life-altering losses to scams. You can update regulations to ensure that all payment methods provide consumer protections that allow victims a way to get their money back. No matter how someone pays a scammer, gold, crypto, gift cards, the place consumers get the cash for those transactions is the bank. Banks have to do a better job protecting customers from scams. Thank you for your time and for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. The question will begin with Senator Tester of Montana.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the courtesy, and thank you all for your testimony. I very much appreciate it. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Knopfsinger. AARP fraud hotline, by your own testimony, you've been overseeing it for 23 years. Is that correct? I'll get to the question here. This is what's the real important part. Over the time that you've been monitoring the fraud hotline, Ms. Harris talked about doubling in the last year. What have you seen on that fraud, on the AARP fraud hotline, as far as the amount of threats?
Thank you so much for that question. We've absolutely seen a significant increase in threats, but I also want to say we've seen an increase in reporting, and I think that's really important because when I started 23 years ago, we weren't getting reports. People were still being victimized, but they were doing it alone, and they were not reporting it to law enforcement, to us, to any of my partners here at the table. And that, to me, is what's encouraging, that people are reporting it, because we need to know what's happening so we can take action to fight it.
One of the things that's happened, and I serve, and so does the chairman of this committee, serve on the Veterans Affairs Committee, is I get contacts from, actually, it's usually from family members of a member who has been scammed. And when we've reported it to law enforcement has come in and they refuse to acknowledge the fact that they've been scammed. How often does that kind of situation happen?
I think it's happening a little bit less than we think it is.
Okay, good.
Yeah, from what I know from talking with victims when they do report it to law enforcement,
Right.
We also help coach our victims when they do report it to law enforcement. We say when you go in there, say you were a victim of a financial crime, get your report, but just have the expectation that it might not be all wrapped up in 24 hours like on a television show, right? Like these are investigations that need to happen. But the most important thing is that people do report it to law enforcement and that we work with our law enforcement partners to help them accept those reports.
So I'm here to tell you that every day I either get an email or a phone call from somebody who's trying to screw me out of my money. So, and a lot of these folks aren't in the U.S. Some of them are from Russia, China, Eastern Bloc. How can the consumer stay ahead of this? And by the way, the same thing with the financial folks, the banks, the credit unions, all those folks. How can they stay ahead of it too? Because it's never ending. I mean, it drives my wife crazy when I actually answer those fake phone numbers and they call up, and I graduated from college 46 years ago. It was a time when my parents could pay for my college, so I have no debt. And they proceed to tell me how much debt I have for going to college. And I'm positive it ain't about because they're nice people. It's because they're trying to take money and not work for it. So tell me how consumers and financial institutions can stay ahead, and that's open to all three of you. Go ahead, Ms. Knopfsinger.
Thank you for that question, and you're absolutely right. I mean, that is one thing that has drastically changed the game of fraud, if you want to call it that, in my 23 years doing this, is the device that we carry in our pockets. These criminals are accessible to us 24/7, and we do need to take control back of these devices that we call phones, but are essentially mini computers that we carry in our pocket. And we need to understand that wherever we are online, the criminals are online waiting for us. There is built-in technology in a lot of these devices to block unknown calls, but people are not adapting it, and we got to get
show
the word.
me how to do that.
I will
would you?
talk to you afterwards. But that's exactly what we need to do, is we need to take control back.
So what about the calls that I get from my neighbors that aren't my neighbors? Is there ways to block those too?
Absolutely. If they're not in your contacts list, you can set it up to have any unknown number that's not in your contacts go directly to voicemail. But it's, again, this is where we need to do some protection barriers in our own lives to protect ourselves. And I'm sure my co-witnesses have some comments as well.
Sure, thank you. So that's, for us, is where the education comes into play. And what we have tried to do in our educational efforts is to get to the brass tacks of what folks are doing and to give people the basics. Because if we give details for things, if we say a scammer may call you and ask for Google Play gift cards, if a scammer calls and asks for a wire transfer instead, they go, oh, that's not a scam. And so we try to be a little bit more broader with that. You know, if it's somebody pretending that they try to pretend to be someone you know or recognize. So if you're getting a cold call from somebody that you're not expecting, you can hang up and call in a number that you know belongs to them. Or they always say there's a prize or a problem involved. They put in that pressure and they ask for those forms of payment that are not easily traceable. So, and we also tell folks not to answer the phone if you don't know the number, that it'll go to voicemail. If it's important, then you can call them back. But I know with our elderly population and the state of the loneliness that we have, it's hard for folks to do.
I'd just like to fight with them and tell them to get a real job, but go ahead, Ms. Harris.
I agree with everyone at this table. However, I'm going to say this. You know how many calls you get. It is incessant and it never ends.
That's right.
We have people, and like, okay, is it really practical for you as a lawmaker who responds to all sorts of constituents to say, only people I know are getting through my phone? Yeah. There has to be more effort put into identifying scam calls. And Shake and Stirred is fabulous. It is, and that's that little thing that comes up on your phone sometimes where it actually tells you, oh, hey, this is a spam risk, right? So that's helpful. But so many of these calls come through to people who, they're not identified as that. They're unidentified, and scammers have adapted already. Scammers are very quick to adapt to any law or rule that we have, but that's why laws have to be really big and really flexible. But I just think that to ask, we tell people don't answer calls you don't know. But we get calls from people who are, I'm a nurse on call, I have to answer my phone. And it is disrupting people's lives still.
Yeah. I appreciate your testimony. I appreciate what all of you are doing, and keep educating. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Tester. Senator Scott's recognized.
Thank you. Ms. Lightbarker, once again, I want to thank you for representing our home state so well. Without any question, South Carolina continues to be a nationwide leader in financial literacy efforts, and I have been impressed by your ingenuity in those efforts when it comes to fraud and scam prevention. I was recently reading about your partnership with the South Carolina Department of Aging to once again deliver scam prevention and education materials to seniors alongside their meal delivery. I think that is brilliant. Honestly, when we're having a meal delivered, if you're able to deliver information during that time, if I'm hungry, I'm going to read it. It's just the way my body works. So I think that is just a fantastic way of taking advantage of a positive opportunity to engage with our seniors, especially in a time where they're going to be more interested, perhaps. Can you share some insights from that program and others that your department has carried out over the years?
Sure, thank you so much. So with that particular partnership, it actually started when we initially released Ditch the Pitch back in 2015. At that point, it was Lieutenant Governor's Office on Aging, and they were gracious enough to put these on the meals. And it's folks not only that are usually in our senior population, but some that are homebound as well. And so they're likely not going to come out to a presentation or an event where we are. And so whenever we do outreach or create a publication or have some kind of campaign, we're looking to try and find those kind of pathways that we can get it into the hands of the folks who need it most. The Department on Aging is one of those. AARP is a great effort there. This Ditch the Pitch bingo that we have, we are part of a World Elder Abuse Task Force, and it's a group of 30 government and non-government agencies that all have some kind of touch point with the senior communities in South Carolina. It could be that they're continuing care retirement communities, or they provide in-home care services or things like that, and the Department on Aging is a part of that as well. But it allows us to network so we know each other's services, so when they are out and about as well, and here's something they can say, that's an issue Consumer Affairs can assist with, or you need a presentation on this topic, that's Consumer Affairs. And we're able to get the word out because we're only 47 full-time employees. And so leveraging those resources at all levels is very important.
For those who don't live in South Carolina, if you don't live in South Carolina, I really don't know why you don't, but in the end, 47 employees, really we have 46 counties. So it's literally one person per county if you look at it from that perspective. Right. That's a massive opportunity and responsibility. Opportunity to work more than 40 hours a week, and the responsibility to engage with as many residents around our state as humanly possible. So we thank you very much for the work that you're already doing.
Thank you.
Let me ask you another question. Sometimes sitting here in Washington, it's easy to get stuck in the Beltway mindset and overlook many of the innovative ideas and solutions that are created within our states. I pride myself in thinking that my goal as a legislator, as an elected official, is not necessarily to be the origin of great ideas, but to be the conduit of great ideas. It's one of the reasons why I love going home every weekend back to South Carolina to hear from my constituents and some experts and people who just have real life experience on what the solution is to said problem. And I look at that from this same perspective when it comes to scams and frauds and dealing with some of the challenges that we face. One of the things that I think we have to do is make sure that we never lose hope that we will win this fight. Time and time again, it feels like the more we see scams being successful, the less energy we have to fight them because we kind of feel like we've lost that fight. And that's never a strong position to respond from. So I refuse to believe that we have lost a fight. Mm-hmm. Are there lessons that we can learn from South Carolina to fight these criminals and prevent harmful scams? Can you please speak to some of the partnerships you have with financial institutions as well as law enforcement to educate, prevent, and combat such crimes?
Sure. So we are not territorial. I mean, we don't say this is our sandbox. We don't want others in it. We certainly invite others in on all levels. We're an agency that regulates non-depository financial institutions, and so we have relationships with folks who are dealing with consumers' monies and financial products in that way. So we'll partner with the South Carolina Bankers Association to do education for their members and other trade associations as well on the scams that we're seeing, because oftentimes it's not just consumer related. Businesses fall victim to scams as well, which ultimately impact the prices and the services that they're providing to those consumers. So making sure that we don't have blinders on to just stay in a certain lane and trying to be as broad as we can in our outreach. And with law enforcement, we partner with different sheriff's associations, the Police Chiefs Association. I just got a contact from Beaufort County where they were reaching out about a cryptocurrency ATM that was being used for some scams there. So having those relationships, building the relationships, and making sure that we're getting out to those members of our business communities to let them know what we're seeing, let them know what to watch out for, and again, that our services that are available and others of our partners too.
Mr. Chairman, I'll finish with this thought. Listening to the witnesses, one thing that comes to mind is that many of us as elected officials do some type of a teletown hall back in our states, and it seems like it would be helpful for us to have in our respective states a teletown hall that includes the AARP, whatever the iteration of your consumer financial agency is in each state, putting them together and then doing one extra step, which is looking at those folks who are homebound, perhaps who may be more vulnerable, because if you're there all the time, you're more likely and more inclined to pick up the phone, perhaps. If we were able to target those folks back at home to make sure that we are including them in a teletown hall, that might be a way for us to address these issues, and not just through legislation, but through information that we can disseminate from our elected official positions.
Good idea, Senator Scott. Ms. Harris, it's easy to look at the data on scams and frauds and see a pretty scary story. 18,000 scams reported in Ohio last year, according to the FBI, $100 million in losses. But like everything, we do a lot of things with data and statistics here, but it obviously affects individuals, and every individual has a story. To run through kind of the human toll of scams for Cuyahoga County residents.
Well, you know, when scammers are able to, to take a huge chunk of someone's life savings, it really is life-altering for them. First of all, they had saved money for their retirements, as you had mentioned, and it's no longer available to them. Second of all, there is a lot of strife within the family. Grown children are very upset when older people lose money to scams. We all have this picture of what scam victims are supposed to be. They're like super vulnerable people who aren't anything like us, aren't running around doing errands, doing work. But the truth is most scam victims are very much like us. They're vibrant people living lives. And these people who have savings set aside, they plan to use it through their retirement, and now it's gone. So what we see is then grown children having to take money out of their savings, out of their kids' college funds to help their parents who were really well set, help them do daily expenses, because now they're living check to check. In addition, I think it's a great point that this causes depression in older people. It's traumatizing to realize that you believe something so fully that you handed over your money to someone. And it's hard for us to get our heads around how we as thinking people could do that, but it happens to people all the time. And it happens to young people as well as old people. But it's truly devastating, and it rips families, really rips them apart.
Thank you for sharing that, similar to what Ms. Knopfsiger said. Ms. Knopfsiger, Americans know to use common sense about scams, to ignore fish emails. People are pretty good at that, I think. But I'm concerned that scammers are getting more sophisticated, more professional, more high-tech than ever, making it harder for people to protect themselves. How are the risks of fraud and scams changing? And in your experience, what have you seen with technology and more sophistication?
Thank you for that question, Senator. In my opinion, a scam is a scam and a fraud is fraud. So even with the onset of technology, still at the basis, what they're after is your money or your personal information. And so what we really try to do at AARP is help people understand what the ask is. So don't get caught up in all the nuances with technology or AI or whatever it is. But I will say one of the biggest changes I've seen with technology is how fast these criminals can get our victims' money, particularly with the onset of cryptocurrency ATM machines that are located across this country. We are seeing victims lose thousands to millions of dollars in these crypto ATM machines, and just like that, the money is gone. So that's definitely, when it comes to technology, one of the things I've seen. But again, fraud is fraud, and we just need to listen for the ask. If they're asking you for personal information or money, it's a scam, and run away.
Yesterday, thank you for that. Yesterday, I met with a group that comes in every year to see me, usually twice a year, a number of people from the Ohio Credit Union League. And these are people that run credit unions in all parts of the state. And they were talking about exactly that, which is a pretty new phenomenon. One last question. Ms. Harris again, thank you. You point out Americans are busy. They're jobs, kids, grandkids, not thinking about someone trying to scam them. Who is better positioned to detect and stop scams on payment platforms, consumers or the companies themselves?
Well, I'll tell you something. I think of scammers like spiders. They're spinning this incredible, deceitful web, and consumers get caught in that, and they get wrapped so tight in the story, they often cannot extract themselves. And we know, because we try to do, if we hear from a family member, we'll try to extract someone from a little longer term scam, and it is hard. We know consumers tell us sometimes that a police officer talked to them and told them they thought something was a scam, but they were so trusting of, I guess the scammer had built such a bond with them that the consumer then walks away with the phone and says, okay, a police officer just told me that this was a scam. Are you a scammer? And the scammers will say something like, that's a local cop. This is federal. They don't understand what we do. I mean, they have an answer for everything. But what you should know is, even in these one and done kind of scams, and I mean like, an arrest scam. We're going to arrest you because you failed to show up for jury duty, right? Those people are, they're on the phone with scammers, keep them on the phone for 3 and 4 and 5 hours. They are so wrapped in this story, they are incapable, in my opinion, it would be impossible for all people who encounter scams and engage with scammers to pull themselves out of that. They cannot do it. There needs to be something beyond that stops the scam and stops the damage, until they can just step away from the panic that they feel and, see their situation from a different viewpoint. And that doesn't happen with things like crypto or these instantaneous payments. And payments, there are so many new kinds of financial payment systems that are growing up through the cracks of regulations. I mean, the rules don't always go over them, right? But also consumers themselves. When a scammer tells someone, this is a government account, and you're going to go to a government kiosk, which is actually just, a machine that's crypto equipped, people think, well, okay, that sounds reasonable. And sometimes scammers who, can get remote access to people's computers, they'll say, well, you need to log onto your account because there's something wrong with your account. So people log onto their bank account, right? And they say, well, there are all these payments that are coming in. So they'd say, type in these codes and I can show you. Then the scammer has access to the computer, and what they're able to do is they reach in while the consumer is on their looking at their checking account. They reach behind that, they pull money out of their savings, they drop it into the checking account. And so the consumer sees with their own eyes, oh, there was a big payment, and that must have been from drug traffickers because I didn't make it. There are so many levels of deception. We have got to help people.
It's pretty clear from your answer, because I asked the companies better positioned to spot fraud. It's clear they are.
Sorry, I didn't
Okay,
answer
that's
that
okay.
question at all, but thanks.
That's fine, I get it. So my time's run out. Senator Brett from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. The surge of financial scams, particularly those that target our elderly and more mature population, our neighbors, our friends, our family members, it's incredibly disturbing. I mean, if you look nationwide, fraud losses have been up. Last year, I think it topped $10 billion. I mean, if you look at the state of Alabama, we were, I think, defrauded out of nearly 74 million, which was up from the 55 million the year before. It's staggering. And we know with the benefits of new and more efficient means of payment also come risk, with criminals using these technologies to truly prey on Americans. And according to the Alabama Securities Commission, in 2016, there were actually 23 cases of elder fraud abuse. If you look back last year, there were 159 cases reported. And then if you look at this year, just in the first 9 months of the fiscal year, there were already over 250 cases reported. So it is clear that we must be doing more. We must be more diligent. We must do better in educating our population, particularly the elderly population, with regards to everything from romance schemes to sweepstakes schemes to impersonations that ultimately let them become victims. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So I want to make sure that we are enabling law enforcement. I want to make sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can. And Mrs. Leibarker, I'd like to start with you. As we know, criminals are constantly adapting and finding new ways to reach and manipulate Americans out of their hard-earned dollars. They're not just scammers operating off of a computer in a basement anymore, but these are large-scale operations and entire business models that are actually created to defraud people. In South Carolina, how is your department keeping up with the ever-growing list of schemes being used to target the older population of Americans? And what are the general themes that you are hearing from victims that you speak to?
Great. Thank you so much. So I think as far as how we stay ahead of things or become aware of things is the reporting. It was mentioned earlier that folks are ashamed when they become victims of scams, so it's trying to get past that stigma so that they can let us know what that new scam is or what that new tactic is, the nuance.
And as she just mentioned, some of them are still in denial about the process as well. It takes a minute. So.
Yes, because they'll stay on the phone with them while they go to the pharmacy store to get the gift card, to activate it, and all this. They kind of hook them in and keep them in there. So the reporting is very helpful for us. Then we can get it out through the media, doing a scam alert or a press release to try and get as many people out there to know.
So real quick, if you are watching this, I want all the people in Alabama to know that if you are a victim of this, we need you to report it. Step one, we need you to report it. Okay, continue.
They're not alone. They're not alone.
You're not alone. Go ahead.
We're more than happy to walk you through that and hopefully we can assist in some circumstances, especially in the area of gift cards, which is the number one way that our folks in South Carolina are making payments to scammers, is that we have contacts that we can hopefully quickly, if you notify us as soon as you realize it, we may be able to get those monies back.
And that's great, the reporting element. I had a young man that I worked with that had this very thing happen with gift cards. And so, but the reporting element, I think, is what we're missing here. So keep going. What else?
And that allows us, because education, we say beware and share. We give the information out to the consumers and we encourage them to share it with their family and their friends so that everybody knows what those red flags are of the scam and where they can go to for those resources to spread that word, because we certainly can't do it on our own.
And can you tell me what type of educational outreach that you're doing there in South Carolina to let people know of this? Obviously, we need people to report it. Then you mentioned putting some type of red flag out, but can you tell me what else you're doing from your department to educate people on this?
Sure. So presentations, in-person and webinar is our number one go-to.
Okay.
It's that face-to-face. We have our Ditch the Pitch Guard Against Guiding Scams. It's our number one publication that we release that kind of gives the pitch that a scammer will use and top tips on how to defend against that scam and then what to do if you do give your information to a scammer. And so us being able to get out there and spread that information is really helpful. And then the webinars too, makes it very easy for us to do that. But the partnerships really is a huge way to disseminate that information and to make sure that everybody knows what everybody else is doing and where they can refer folks to. And again, get it out to the masses.
Absolutely. And in my last few seconds here, we're going to try to push this out to as many Alabamians as possible. Can each of you give a piece of advice to my constituents about how to be vigilant in this area?
Thank you. I would say first and foremost, just understand that this is a problem that affects anyone of any age, and it doesn't matter your education level. I think a lot of people don't think it's going to happen to them. So when you see an article in your local paper or in your AARP magazine, read it, because a lot of people bypass it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, the number one thing is if you get that cold call, that email, that text, no matter how it's coming to you, where somebody is asking for that personal information or that money, it's a scam.
It's a scam. Don't click on it. Don't respond.
It doesn't matter who they say they are.
Got
Cut
it.
off the communication, reach out directly to who they say they are with the phone number that you know belongs to them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Brett. Senator Warner of Virginia's recognized.
Do you mind if
I'm
when
sorry,
we're
I'm
trying to
sorry,
get
sure.
some good
Oh,
information out to
sure.
constituents?
I was
Thank
just
you.
going to say, we would really like people to already have a list available to them by their phone of people they can check with.
Okay.
Places that they can call. So if you get a call and it's asking you for money, it's a scam, but sometimes it's hard for people to recognize that. So if you're asked to make a big decision in a very short period of time, then have numbers of a friend, have numbers of your local police department, have numbers of the Consumer Protection Agency near you. If you have those in advance, you are more likely to dial those numbers to get help than before you step deeper into that scam.
That is great advice. Thank you so much. I appreciate what y'all are doing.
Thank you, Senator Warner, Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you doing this. And, I think all good advice. I appreciate all of that. I know in Virginia, according to the FBI's Crime Compliance Center, scammers stole more than $64 million from Virginians over 60, about 2,500 cases. I'm going to cite a case in Virginia, but it kind of brings back a little bit of memory to me. I remember when my dad passed away, and he'd actually told me a little before, and this a couple years back. I'm not sure it would be formally scams, but he'd been on the line buying kind of penny stocks of mining operations that sure as heck I don't think were SEC sanctioned. So this is not a new phenomenon. I do think with the technology tools, it's gotten a lot worse. Matter of fact, a lot of this came to attention because there was a gentleman in Virginia named Larry Cook, retired Navy captain. I think probably in you all are aware of this case. After suffering from a stroke in 2019, he became victim of an international phishing scam and initially stole 49 grand from him. Time of his death, he'd made 74 additional wire transfers, $3.6 million. Allowed the General Assembly in Virginia to pass something called Larry's Law that has improved. We've actually done some of that already in the federal legislation that was passed years back, which was a piece of this, and I think I'll start with our Ms. Harris and Ms. Leibacher, to make sure that our financial institutions, our employees are better trained to spot some of this behavior. How do you think we've done on that? And is there more that we could do at the federal level?
Yeah, I think to require banks and financial companies to actually educate tellers. We have a scam bingo game too, and we were playing it once, and a woman from another county came to the game, and she stood up during the game and said that she had received an email that told her that there was something wrong with her account. So she printed out the email, she got online, she looked at her account, there was nothing wrong. She went to the bank. The bank teller looked at the account and said, I can't find anything wrong. And she showed her the email. The bank teller called the scammer's number on the email, talked for a minute, hung up the phone, circled the number, handed it back to her and said, oh, you need to call them to work it out.
Wow.
I mean, they're just, I understand that banks have a lot of turnover, and I know they're trying very hard.
I got it. Let's go to, because I want
Sorry.
to try to get 3 questions in.
Yeah, education and awareness is important for consumers, but the businesses as well. When they're on that front line where the consumer especially is coming in and having that face-to-face communication, they're in a great position to be able to talk to the consumer from that side of things, try and get past that emotional component that was talked about earlier, but then also they know what red flags are, right? We have some of those at the levels, at the federal level for identity theft, but it would be great to have some for the scam component.
I wonder as well, since the Larry's Law case in Virginia, the scammers were actually based in Thailand. So there's even, I'm chair of the Intelligence Committee. I think there's this coordination we need to have, IC and law enforcement community involved. Right. I'm curious as well, as somebody who's focused a lot of time on cybersecurity, I think back to the OPM breach. I think back to the Equifax breach. More recently, the August announcement of the public data breach that a lot of seniors' information, I think the breach was in April, but didn't get reported to August. Do we think that lax cybersecurity on some of these massive databases lead to some of this activity? I believe, have we seen any connection, and Ms. Knopfler from AARP part as well, have you seen?
Thank you for that. I mean, I certainly think it's possibility that all of our information is out there. And that's one of the things that we tried to tell people is that our information is out there. And so this is what you can do to be proactive to protect yourself. Put a freeze on your credit report, check your credit report, do every proactive measure to keep yourself safe, because it's every day goes by when one of us gets a notification about a breach.
But that puts the burden back on the consumer. Well, I guess maybe I should go back to our regulators here. Like, if bad cybersecurity hygiene is leading to ability for scammers to gain data that has personal information about calling that vulnerable senior, I think we need to better connect the dots. And frankly, at some point, this is why I'm thinking some of these areas we need minimum cybersecurity standards, because at the end of the day, the victim, may be victimized by this effort, but they're not. My time. Let me get my last point in, Madam Chair. So I'm getting a question on this. AI. I think a lot of great upside on this. We've got a hearing next week on how AI tools are potentially manipulating in our elections. But boy, oh boy, you talk about a brand new open running field in scamming. I'm almost surprised we've not seen more, but deepfake technology literally gets better, not on an annual basis, on a monthly basis. And I would hope that we could take a look at this. And I would point out, if Senator Klobuchar was here, she would make the point, when we haven't done anything at the federal level, states, and not kind of what you'd normally think, state like Texas has already taken this on AI manipulation of political ads. And if this ought to be a place where maybe, I wouldn't often say we ought to be following the Texas legislature, but this might be one where we take a lesson. Thank you for giving me the extra minute.
Thank you, Senator Warner. Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank all of you for your testimony. And all of us have stories to tell about what's happening in each of our states, because this, of course, has been a terrible sort of national phenomena, the defrauding of Americans, these scams, and especially targeting seniors. According to the FBI's annual crime report, almost 2,000 Marylanders over the age of 60 lost a combined $72 million due to fraud in 2023, with the top 5 most common crimes types including government impersonation, investment scams, and romance schemes, among others. And I know this is a pattern that you're seeing around the country. One of the challenges is that these scams have gotten more sophisticated over time. I mean, we've been having to deal with scams, obviously, throughout our history, but they seem to be getting more sophisticated. So, Ms. Knopfler, if you could just talk briefly about, what additional tools that we need to fight these more sophisticated techniques on the, being perpetrated by the fraudsters.
Thank you for that question. I certainly think data sharing amongst all regulators and law enforcement needs to increase so we can share what's happening and so we can fight it. But I'll say with the onset of, I heard AI earlier, with the onset of what we're seeing in our communities with the crypto ATM machines and that technology, that is certainly changing the game of fraud. And so we really need to work together to see how we can slow the funds going through those cryptocurrency ATM machines. I had a woman recently who spent 2 hours inserting $80,000 in cash into one of those crypto ATM machines, that the employees at the store actually brought her a chair because she looked tired. So when we talk about technology, that's certainly something I would like to see.
And you sort of touched on the next area that I wanted to investigate, and really welcome all of your answers here with respect to the use of crypto as part of these schemes, because the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center's Elder Fraud Report of 2023 highlights crypto as the most common tool used by these illicit actors to scam vulnerable people. And this is a worldwide phenomenon. I had a constituent case where a senior from Rockville, Maryland, fell victim to a scam on the Chinese app WeChat. After several months of friendly interaction, this constituent was conned into sending $300,000 in what he assumed was an investment app focused on crypto investments. Unfortunately, the funds were transferred into accounts outside of American jurisdiction in Hong Kong. And despite them being informed that this was obviously a scam by a Citibank employee who said this has got all the markings of a scam, the transaction was completed. So how does the use of these tools like cryptocurrency outside of the regulated financial system, how is it being used more and more by scam artists, and what can we be doing about it? Maybe we just quickly go down the line. Thanks.
It's definitely being used. I mean, we started hearing about cryptocurrency ATMs and then cryptocurrency investment fraud probably about 4 years ago. And it doesn't matter your age or who you are, it's affecting everyone. And now it's coming in via text messages, and we're seeing it online as well. So it is a big problem that we need to really focus on.
At our office, we regulate non-depository financial institutions, but money transmitters are regulated through our state attorney general's office. And it's a model law that would bring in these crypto ATMs, but it doesn't have a component about the scam side of things. We had heard, I think it was Connecticut, that had a bill that they were contemplating and may have even passed that would allow a person who, if it was their first time utilizing a crypto ATM, would be able to cancel that transaction within 48 hours to try and give that kind of space for them to step back from it and see whether or not they thought that it was a scam. So that's something that we've been talking to other state regulators about.
Thank you.
And I would say that that the holds could be longer, both for banks. I mean, there's a little period where consumers can try to get their money back if they transfer money by wires. That doesn't exist for crypto and for most of the peer-to-peer payments, and even for gift cards, really. There's nothing. And, you know, we see the gift card companies put caps on how many gift cards you can buy, but then they just go to another store and buy more. And it's the same with crypto, for that matter. But I think we really need to have like baked in consumer protections that allow people who are scammed to get their money back. And I think that these institutions may have to have some skin in the game to give them the gumption to figure out the tools to do it.
Thank you. That was very helpful. We'll look into the Connecticut law and that kind of approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Van Hollen. Senator Warren.
Thank you very much, and thank you for holding this hearing today, and thank you all for being here. So I want to ask about someone later in life, maybe someone whose spouse passed away a few years ago, who's recently started spending more time online, maybe a dating app. They try to meet someone. They talk about food. They talk about work, family, friends. It just feels good to have someone to be able to interact with. And for weeks, maybe even months, the subject of money never comes up. And then one day, the new online friend reveals how much money they have just made in this amazing investment. Now, our senior, very suspicious, not easily tricked, quite reasonable person. They don't send a dime to the online acquaintance. In fact, to reassure our senior, the online acquaintance says, you know, you should set up your own trading account and load your money directly into it. I certainly wouldn't want any access to that. And the online acquaintance says, all I'll do is just give you some tips on good times to invest and the kind of investments you want to make. That seems so safe to someone. So, Ms. Knopfziger, you lead the AARP's victim support team. Does this story sound familiar to you?
Yes, we hear this every day. This sounds like a romance scam / cryptocurrency scam.
And this scam, I assume, starts small. maybe the scammer starts out saying invest $100. So the senior sets up the account, deposits $100, and from what it looks like on the website, within a day, there's $200 in the account. Absolutely doubled their money in a day. So they load another 200 in and then 400 in, and it just keeps growing. Now they've got $1,000 in this account, even though they've only put $400 into it. Then they get the message from the online friend. This is the moment. This is the moment to go big. The investment is about to go through the roof. So our senior withdraws money from their retirement account, puts it in this great new investment, and over a few months' time, our senior has now invested $300,000 on this website, and it shows them that the $300,000 has ballooned to $3 million. Of course, the senior doesn't know it yet, but the dashboard is entirely fake. There is no $3 million. And of course, the $300,000 has completely disappeared. So, Ms. Dossiger, when do the victims discover that they have been defrauded?
It depends. I mean, sometimes they'll try to withdraw that money and they'll say, oh no, you have to pay another $5,000, penalty fee or taxes. And so the victim thinks, oh, well, it's another $5,000 at this point. I already have $3 million, why not? So they'll put that in. And then that's when the doubt starts to seep in. But unfortunately, we have heard on the helpline that people don't realize it until every single penny is gone.
Right. And this is why I think it's so important to underscore this. I'm all for being able to get your money back in 48 hours, recognizing that's better than no time at all. But we're talking about the money has disappeared weeks earlier, sometimes maybe even months earlier. And the story I have told is not just a hypothetical. This is based on countless true stories, including one specifically from a victim in Massachusetts. According to the FBI, Massachusetts residents lost $85 million to romance or fake investment scams last year alone. In the last 4 years, consumers around the globe are estimated to have lost $75 billion. So, Ms. Knopfsiger, once the crime has been reported, is law enforcement able to get the money back for victims?
We certainly encourage every victim to report to law enforcement, but law enforcement tells me it's very difficult to claw that money back because usually it is sent on a digital currency platform and it's also sent overseas. And as you said, oftentimes it's not reported in a timely manner, but we still always encourage to report.
So what more can the federal government do here?
Thank you. I think there's better coordination, better data sharing, and I think there's just maybe more resources and education that we need to put into law enforcement to understand how this money is being sent and to understand it because this is such a new technology. I mean, crypto is fairly new to a lot of people.
So let me just make sure I'm understanding your last point there. These happen using crypto, is that right? And so are you suggesting that maybe better regulation here would be useful?
I'm not sure if I'm suggesting that, but what I'm saying is I think there's just a lot of misunderstanding about what crypto is, where it's going, how it's being used. I certainly know that a lot of the people who call our helpline don't even know it, even though they're investing in it.
Okay. So we need to do more to shut down these criminal gangs and to help the hardworking Americans who are losing their life savings to these scams every day. And I appreciate the work that all of you are doing. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Senator Helmy, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate being here and appreciate this being my first opportunity on the committee and to speak about the timeliness of this issue. Literally this morning, one of the first calls I took was from a consumer protection advocate in one of our more populated county talking about this hearing and what she is seeing in seniors in Hudson County, New Jersey. So to Ms. Knopfsiger, thank you for being here and for the work you're doing, especially what your organization is doing in New Jersey. And to Ms. Lieberker and Harris, thank you for your service and the ever-growing, unfortunately, importance of your positions. I would just pick up a thread that was left about this importance to New Jersey. According to the FBI's most recent IC3 Elder report, New Jerseyans reported over $100 million in losses to scams and frauds, predominantly among our elder community, which is a huge sum to anybody, but specifically as you talk about fixed income communities, it's a massive amount. Ms. Knopfsinger, if I can ask you, earlier this year, there was a massive data breach at the background company, National Public Data. In my opinion, rather underreported, given that as many as 2.9 billion personal records may have been exposed with names, addresses, social security numbers, and other personal information. As law enforcement works to determine the extent of the breach, it's obviously imperative that as many Americans as possible, especially our seniors, take steps to protect their financial accounts and their credit. If I may ask, what is AARP doing to inform our seniors of the breach and to inform them of steps they can take to protect their credit? I would ask you, additionally, what more can Congress or state houses be doing to help as a part of the information process, providing best practices to this community and tools for technical assistance for monitoring and reporting of suspicious activity? Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you for that question. Anytime there is a data breach, the calls on our Fraud Watch Network helpline spike, because this is very concerning to a lot of Americans and primarily older Americans when they get notification that their information is out there. So we certainly work one-on-one with them and help them through that process. We help them understand how to check your credit report, freeze your credit. And then AARP has 53 state offices across the country and thousands of volunteers and 35 million members. So we certainly take that opportunity to put articles and information in our two publications, AARP Magazine and the Bulletin, to get the word out. But one of the things we want to do with these data breaches is not scare people. We want to empower people to take action. So anything that AARP can do with state and federal regulators to look at, better protections for older adults is certainly something that AARP would love to work with people with.
Thank you. If I may stay with you and pick up on a thread that Senator Warren left, we've all read these articles. I recently read an article in a New Jersey publication about a 73-year-old woman who was scammed out of about $50,000 by a stranger she had met on Facebook. Unfortunately, as mentioned, many of the investment scams start in a very similar fashion, whether it be on Facebook, a comment on Twitter, other messaging apps, or LinkedIn. The common thread here is there is a starting point for many of these that begins on messaging apps or social media. Again, staying with you, the trend I think we're all seeing it is there more that social media companies could be doing to limit the ability of scammers to operate on their platforms, and is there more oversight that Congress can be providing, and how so?
Thank you for that. I'm here really to represent the victims of fraud and the AARP helpline. So on the oversight part, I can certainly take that back to my team. But what I will say is I think that this is actually where we could utilize some of the AI for good and use some of the AI to monitor a lot of those messaging apps, a lot of the stuff on, whether it's Facebook or Twitter, to pull out the bad actors that are using the same scripts. Because we know that a lot of people and their fraudsters are meeting on these social media apps.
Yeah, I think the point and the conclusion, right, that we draw is, to, again, Senator Warren's point, by the time someone finds out the money's been gone weeks, if not months, the data's been gone weeks, if not months. In the national public data issue, it was, December 23 is when a number of these attacks started. It was April 24, I think, when folks started to know that the information was out there. And if we know that the starting point for the most of these engagement starts on a social media company, there's probably an opportunity to try to get there at the starting point instead of, where I'll ask Ms. Lieberk and Harris on the law enforcement piece. And if I can ask you both the same question, the unfortunate trend, and again, this was part of the conversation I had with an individual in Hudson County today, it's tremendously difficult to catch these perpetrators and bring any type of relief to the victims. If I can ask both of you, what are the challenges that you're seeing, A, in reporting, and B, when it is reported, and law enforcement being able to go after any of these perpetrators and secure any relief for those impacted?
Sure. So I think the challenge that we had talked about previously was reporting it all. A lot of folks are ashamed, they're embarrassed if they've given their funds up to a scammer. And so getting people to let us know and to make us aware of what's going on out there is number one. And then on the law enforcement's perspective, because it is outside of the country, a lot of times it makes it difficult for them to do anything about it. Education is a component of it that they try to engage in with the consumer, but it's after the fact to that degree. We're members of the FTC Sentinel database where we report scams and we report complaints, as are several other law enforcement agencies and folks at the local level and state, the federal level, so that it compiles all of this information in hopes of being able to give the information to those agencies that have the jurisdiction over the matter and to see the patterns and practices and the trends to utilize those multinational agreements that they have to try and get to where these are originating from.
I just want to say that we face challenges just getting some of these social media sites to take down scam pages, right? So we had a person who had been through a trauma, and she was very traumatized. She lost money to a scam, and because she was so desperate for money, they hit her again and told her she had won a government grant, and those don't exist. And the person pretended to be from HHS, and she encountered them on Facebook, and she had sent lots of money, and she was getting antsy, and she called our office not to report a scam, but to get help getting HHS to cough up this grant. And so my investigator looked at the page. There was a picture of, it was an actual government employee, you know, a woman in a suit, American flags behind her, and this is how she was contacting people, but her, you know, things people posted weren't public, right? So we just went in on our page, you know, we're a government page, right? And we clicked the fraud button, report fraud, and we got back the same message that you would get if you just reported somebody's objectionable content, right? So nothing happened. The page didn't come down. So we found a contact for the company, and we sent them the information, and they said, page down. So then this woman came back to us later, and she was still in contact with other people in HHS on the same social media site. And so we looked for the same, we just did a search for the same photo, right? We're not AI, we're just people looking up photo images, find, you know, 10 more pages with that photo, and more sites also claiming to offer HHS grants. And I just want to know if there are algorithms that predict everything in there that allow these sites, why not aim them at fraud? And why not give, you know, consumers and agencies a meaningful way to, you know, when they report fraud, to have those things immediately taken down to avoid harm to consumers?
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Helmy. Would you like to wrap up? We're about 3 minutes over, so we need to wrap up. Thank you.
Chair. Thank you all. Thank you all. I'll just note Senator Van Hollen's leadership on some issues on bringing more resources to states to help combat some of this. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Chairman Brown. Very important hearing, and I appreciate being a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I want to thank all of our witnesses for being with us today. For senators who wish to submit questions for the record, those questions are due 1 week from today on Thursday, September 19th. The witnesses will have 45 days to respond to any questions. So thank you very much to all of you for this great hearing. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.